We're about a quarter of the way through the fantasy hockey season already. There are a drastic amount of changes that we've seen from a year-over-year perspective. We've got guys like Leo Carlsson, Macklin Celebrini, Connor Bedard leading the NHL in points. It is a massive turnover in terms of some of the big dogs in the league. Nathan MacKinnon's still up there, though. But we have seen some high-end players really struggling out of the gate, and this is what this video is meant to bring you guys, is an opportunity for you guys to, if you're struggling early on, if you want to change up the mix of your team, here are trade targets that we recommend for you guys to go after, given their either slow start or potentially coming back into fruition in terms of what we normally see in terms of their production moving forward. Guys, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Here are 6 trade targets that you should be targeting in fantasy hockey. All right, so as you can tell by the thumbnail, I was originally going to have Artemi Panarin here. I did just recently swap him out with JT Miller, given the fact that Panarin has kind of come back to his regular self in the last little bit. It's like he goes bald and then he scores 5 points in his last like 3 or 4 games. So that's just crazy. So I think Panarin is a little bit more difficult, I'll say, or unrealistic to potentially obtain. I know if you did this about a week ago when I was doing a lot of the research for these players, Panarin would have been a great option, but we're still in the JT Miller conversation here. And you look at his last 6 games and he only has 1 point. The production is really starting to be concerning, especially for fantasy hockey managers. And he only has 4 points in his last 10 games. So I think his value is never going to be lower than this point in the season, partially because it looks like the Rangers have turned things around. It really shows how much of a guy like Vincent Trocheck is in terms of, what he brings to that team as a whole, whether it's just him being around and the team getting excited about him being back in the lineup or what he actually brings on the ice. He's clearly a very important part of that Rangers team. So like I said, with Miller, the production just still isn't there. And it's really difficult for a manager to sit there and look and be like, oh, like the Rangers popped off for like 6 goals. Like Panarin went off. You've got Trocheck back in the fold. Adam Fox is, doing a lot better now in terms of like production. And then you look at JT Miller and it's like it's still zeros across the board. So that's really frustrating for managers. But I do think the Rangers are starting to figure it out, or at least get back on track to what we kind of expected out of them this year. There's still some possibility that, they could continue their struggles, but it does look a little bit better, at least in the last couple games. I think the biggest reason why you should trade for JT Miller right now is his peripherals are still there. The shot volume's still solid. He's going to get you around 200 hits. Like, he'll chip in a couple blocks here and there. He's usually an absolute fiend on the power play, but the Rangers power play has really struggled as of late, and we're starting to see them, like I said, get back to normal, or at least like regress closer to the mean. But the production, it just hasn't been there for JT Miller, so his value should be obtainable still. And he is only shooting 7% currently, where his career average is pretty much double that. So expect, again, some regression back to the mean for Miller. I think the production is going to come. I think this might possibly be the only time that you're going to be able to go after a guy like this in the season. Very similar story with Brayden Point. One of the most consistent scorers in the National Hockey League over the past 2, even 3 years. He's one of the safest players. We talk about it all the time. I talked about it in the video. He's right up there with Sidney Crosby in terms of his year-over-year production, but he does only have 1 goal in his last 11 games, and I don't think his value will get any lower than this moving forward. His shots per 60 have come down slightly. I'm not too concerned about that just yet. I think if there's more of a sample size for Point, for example, like if we saw this over the 25-30 games, then I'm like, okay, maybe like the shots are, and the shots were never like great to begin with, but maybe the shots are concerning at this point. But the power play is also incredibly bad. For some reason, it's ranked 20th right now at 18%. It's been a top 5 power play the past 2 seasons. Last year, they were 5th. The year before, they were 1st. They usually hover around 27 to 30% on average, just because of how good the personnel is. They're also kind of like dealing with some injuries right now, like Hedman's out. Kuch obviously hasn't been Kucherov-esque, at least to start the season. He hasn't been bad. Like, I use struggle very loosely in this context, but he hasn't been like the Kucherov that you would expect, for example. So I think just given the the fact that Point is such a safe player, and I still believe that, over the next 3 quarters of the season, that he's going to get back to the normal pace that he's had. I think Point is a really good buy low right now, especially because you're not seeing the same shot volume, and managers are going to be frustrated with that, and the fact that he's not scoring on top of that. So I think the power play is going to figure it out. I think Point is going to get back on the board. Expect a big game out of him in the next 5. I expect that he's just going to get back on track. So I think Point is a really good option, and very similar to JT Miller, might be the only time that you will be able to trade for a guy like this. Moving on to Zach Werenski. Now, he's a little bit interesting because he did have a burst where he had 6 points in 3 games, but he's had 5 points in the remaining 13 outside of those 3 games. So it looked for a second like, he's back. Columbus is producing, or at least he is. But again, in the last 6, as you can see, he only has 1 assist. And Columbus is actually pretty good across the board in terms of their overall team numbers. Like, their top half of the league in terms of expected goals Corsi and expected goals for, which is our stats that we like to look at in terms of like the overall team production. So I don't quite think that they're the same team as last year. At least we're seeing guys like Sean Monahan really struggle out of the gate. Zach Werenski obviously has been solid, but I don't think he's been anywhere as advertised, or at least like looking at where you guys drafted him, like that type of level of production. And we were worried of this early on, like whether it was the injury history that he had, or the fact that, it could just be like an outlier season where you have this crazy 80-point defenseman with 300 shots and 150 plus blocks, which we still love about Werenski. Like, the shot and block mix is elite, and he's obviously a lock for power play 1, so you don't have to worry about anything in that regard. I still think he can be and finish around 60 to 65 points with over 290 shots. Like, he's just that type of player. He's kind of like Yossi-esque in that sense now. And he's still playing a ton of minutes at skating, around 24 minutes average time on ice. Like, he's going to continue to have the same role that he has. And even though Columbus might have had like a one-off year last year in terms of the production, I think Werenski himself is very safe. It's very similar to a situation like Philip Forsberg in Nashville, where, the team itself might be struggling, but Forsberg will continue to be Forsberg. It's exactly like that for Zach Werenski. But I think if there's a time that you're going to trade for him, it's right now. You're looking at a pretty discounted rate, just given what he's produced over the last 5-6 games. Again, like, managers might want to hold on to him just because of those peripheral stats, but I think it's the same conversation as JT Miller, where it's like he typically isn't available, and, given the struggles that Columbus has had, he could be made available for a pretty decent price at this point. So I recommend that if you guys have guys even Matthew Schaefer is a great example. I know there's a lot of hype around him still. He seems to be producing at basically a point a game at this point and just elite on the power play. It's like you could move him potentially for a guy like Zach Werenski, who's probably, in my opinion, safer, or at least has a better peripheral floor moving forward. Just an example. I'm not saying that Schaefer can continue, but just using that as an example of a trade. But you want to kind of use the opportunity that Werenski isn't producing at a godly rate right now, based off what we saw last year, to go and acquire a guy that's got a really safe floor and still has some offensive upside. Mackenzie Weegar should be a lot cheaper than a guy like Zach Werenski. It's really rough across the board. His peripheral stats, all of his rates are down compared to last year. His shot volume, his hit volume, his block volume, even the production has just been atrocious for him up until this point. He is going to be on power play 1 for the foreseeable future, maybe even permanently. We'll see what happens with Zane Parekh. We did see Parekh on that top power play unit in the last couple games before he got injured, so it's possible that he comes back and jumps back onto that power play 1. But for right now, it is Mackenzie Weegar's show. So if you look at his last 6 games, though, you'll see that a lot of his peripheral rates are back to what we saw out of him historically. So I think Weegar is a really good buy low option. People are really looking at the Flames in a vacuum and being like, these guys are an absolute dumpster fire, and use that for a reason to go and acquire Mackenzie Weegar, is the fact that the Flames aren't good offensively, and it's possible that Weegar kind of ends in that 30 to 35 point range, but the peripherals are going to make it very easy for you to hold on to him as a D2 or a D3. And like I said, he won't be as expensive as a guy like Zach Werenski. You can go and put a package together for him right now. I think think he's a really good option just to have for the peripherals and the floor sake. If you're again looking for a more competent D2 or D3, and again, should be a lock on power play 1 moving forward. I do like him as a kind of a buy low option, obviously with him being in this video, but just be wary of the fact that, again, it might not get better for Calgary and the point production might ultimately not be there, but I don't foresee it being as bad as what it is now, especially if Uyghur's back to kind of his normal shot, block, and hit volume. Zach Hyman is another really good option and should be a pretty cheap get. He'll be back this week, likely Saturday is the rumor out of Chris Knobloch. It's unlikely that he plays tonight against Philly. That's the Wednesday. He's pretty much the glue guy for this team. Like, he's going to be line 1, power play 1, skating alongside McDavid in all situations, potentially even Draisaitl and McDavid in all situations when they kind of load up that top line. He's got a great goal, shot, and hit mix. He had 27 goals, 210 shots, close to a hit per game in his last 73, which was the year before he got injured in the latter half of the season, just towards the end there. So again, you could expect similar production out of Hyman. He's going to have it, if he stays healthy for the rest of the season, he's going to be around that 65 game mark. So again, you could expect like 25 goals, close to 200 shots, probably around a hit a game. He's been pretty consistent with that over the last 3 years. So I think it's really, really good value right now for Zach Hyman. And you do have some time to kind of work with this. As I said, he is expected to be back on the Saturday, but his value likely only goes up from here, being on that top line, that top power play. It could also be possible that it takes a little bit of time for him to kind of get back on track, just him being out with the injury, it being a wrist injury, him having surgery around that. So even if he does get off to a little slow start, I still think he's a really good buy low option for a lot of you. And the Oilers just in general need a bit of a spark, and I think Hyman is that guy. He was the one that kind of spoke up in the dressing room in that first kind of Stanley Cup final where they lost to Florida, being like, we're going to be back here. So he's really just that spark that this team needs to kind of get going, and I think he's going to be a really good option moving forward in basically every fantasy league that you play in. So would highly recommend going out and putting in some offers for Zach Hyman. And then finally, the last guy on our list, he's back, guys. Andrei Svechnikov. Shout out to you guys for those of you that held on him or just snatched him up off waivers recently. I think this could be the only time that managers would be willing to move him or the fact that not even that they're willing to move him, the fact that they could move him. So if you say, for example, you were really frustrated with the fact that like you draft this guy and he's just like, he is brutal out of the gate. Like the ice time is down. He's playing line 4. He's not on any power plays. You know, he's just like having a really, really tough start. And then all of a sudden he's really picked it up. He's got 4 points in his last 5 games. So this is really the only opportunity if you're going to sell on this guy and you're like, I don't see this being sustainable in the future, that they could sell on him. So people and managers are going to be open to moving him. And I think he's a great buy low option. The shooting percentage is still down for him. He's currently only at 9.1% shooting percentage, and his career lives around like 16.5. So I think, you know, just given the fact that he's back on power play 1, the shot volume's back, the hit volume's back, he is producing at 5-on-5. I think he just in general, if you watch any Canes games, he looks like a completely different player based off what we saw earlier in the year. I think Svech is a really kind of like good mid to low tier buy low option, very similar to like Zach Hyman, where it's like he's got a ton of upside moving forward when he continues in this role. And I don't foresee a future where like he seems to be slowing down. Like look at his ice time, like in 3 of his last 5 games, he's been over 17 minutes time on ice. And look at the production that he gets when he's in that. He's still skating power play 1, which is a really good option. Like Shane Gostisbehere's back into the mix now, who is absolutely lights out of the gate, who could be another buy low option for you guys. If you're looking for kind of a mid-tier defenseman, I would add him to the list. But again, like I think it's a really good option moving forward. We love the shot, hit, and production mix out of him, very similar to a guy like Zach Hyman. And I think Svech is just a good kind of like mid-tier buy low option for you guys that aren't looking to necessarily pay a premium or pay a ton to get a guy like a JT Miller. So I'm personally trying to buy low on a guy like Andrei Svechnikov. Guys, that will do for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and that like button, as well as let me know in the comments down below who you think are really good buy low options right now. There was a couple other ones that I was looking at, but these are the 6 that I felt the most confident in moving forward. Let me know what you guys think. If you guys have any questions for potential trades for any of these players, let me know in the comments down below. I will be replying to every single one of them as quickly as I possibly can. Thank you guys again. Hopefully you enjoyed. I will see you in the next video.